I never thought I'd be the type of person to find myself in a situation like this. But here I am, sitting in a hotel room, staring at the blank screen of my phone, trying to figure out how it all went so wrong. I didn't plan to tell anyone this story. It feels like a kind of betrayal, but I think it's the only way I can make sense of what happened. It all started with the house. I've always had a strange relationship with possessions. I wasn't the kind of guy who cared much about status symbols or fancy things, but there was one thing I was obsessive about: security. I didn't grow up with much, so when I started making money, I made sure I could afford a little peace of mind. No more struggling to pay rent. No more worrying about where the next paycheck was coming from. And no more renting places that felt temporary. That's why I bought the beach house. The house wasn't even my dream home. It was simple, modest, but it was mine. I thought having this place would help me and my wife, Marissa, find a kind of escape from the chaos of the city. A place to unwind, disconnect, and spend time together without distractions. That's what I envisioned. It was supposed to be a fresh start, even though we'd already been married for 4 years. Our marriage had been fine, I guess. We didn't have issues, but we didn't have the kind of connection that people brag about either. Sometimes it felt like we were just two people living parallel lives, but not together. And that's where the beach house came in. I thought it could be the thing that brought us closer, brought back the spark that seemed to be fading. The first weekend we went there was quiet. We walked on the beach, had some drinks, and just existed in each other's company. It was nice, in a way, but something still felt off. Marissa seemed distant, lost in her own thoughts, her mind clearly somewhere else. And I couldn't help but wonder if this house wasn't going to be the solution I thought it was. Fast forward a few months, and the house became a kind of escape for both of us. Marissa began going there more often on her own, claiming she needed alone time to focus on work or just clear her head. I didn't question it at first. It wasn't unusual for her to need time to herself. But the more time she spent there alone, the more I noticed something strange. The atmosphere shifted. One day, I decided to show up unannounced. It was a weekday, and I thought I'd surprise her. Maybe we could have a spontaneous evening together, just the two of us. I grabbed some takeout on my way, imagining her smiling when I walked through the door. Instead, when I got to the house, I didn't get a warm greeting. No hug. No excitement. I could hear voices inside. I stood outside for a few moments, wondering if I was just imagining things. It wasn't unusual for Marissa to have friends over, but the laughter I heard didn't sound like her usual tone. I pushed open the door, expecting to find her sitting with a friend or maybe a neighbor. But what I found was a man. A man I didn't recognize. He was sitting on the couch, laughing with Marissa as if they'd known each other for years. And when I walked in, he didn't even flinch. In fact, he looked at me with a smile that seemed almost too casual, like this was completely normal. "Hey there," he said, standing up to shake my hand. "I'm Alex. You must be Marissa's husband, right?" I stood frozen for a moment. Marissa was already standing, brushing her hair out of her face like nothing was wrong. "Oh, Evan, I didn't know you were coming by today," she said, her voice light, almost like she didn't care. "Alex is an old friend. He was just passing through, and we thought we'd catch up. I hope that's okay." There was something in her voice that made my stomach turn. It wasn't the tone of a wife greeting her husband after a long day. It was almost rehearsed. I nodded, forcing a smile. Of course, I didn't mean to interrupt. But something in the back of my mind was screaming. I didn't trust this guy. The way he was sitting on our couch. The way he looked at Marissa. The way she wasn't even bothered by his presence. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was being paranoid. But as I sat down, I noticed more things that didn't add up. They were talking like they were more than just old friends. More like people who had shared something deeper, something I wasn't aware of. I told myself I was overthinking it, but that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I thought I knew about my wife, about our life together, was beginning to unravel. The next morning, Alex was gone. Just like that. No goodbye, no explanation. Marissa acted like it was nothing, but something in me snapped. It was then that I realized the beach house wasn't just a place to escape. It was a place for secrets. And I wasn't sure I wanted to find out what else was hidden inside it. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The more I tried to push it out of my head, the more it came back. That man, Alex, who was he really? And why did Marissa act like she didn't care that I had just walked in on an intimate moment between them? The whole thing felt off, but I didn't have enough to confront her about it. It was just a feeling. But that feeling, the gnawing sense that something wasn't right, kept clawing at me. I decided I needed to keep an eye on things, not to spy, but just to understand what was going on behind the scenes. For the next few days, I noticed Marissa being a little more distant. I didn't want to seem like the jealous husband, but she wasn't acting like herself. She spent more time at the beach house, coming home later each night, sometimes saying she had a late meeting or was catching up with a colleague. But the thing is, her stories didn't line up. Sometimes I would ask about the meeting or the work she claimed to be doing, and she'd get defensive. Her answers were vague, like she was hiding something. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. After all, we were married. We were supposed to trust each other. But every time I asked, she seemed to get more uncomfortable, and that made my suspicions grow. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I got a call from an unknown number one night. It was a Saturday, and I had stayed home for once, hoping to spend some quality time together. The call interrupted my evening, and when I saw the number, a strange feeling hit me. Something told me it wasn't just a random caller. I picked up, my heart beating faster than usual. "Hello?" I said, trying to sound calm, but my voice betrayed me. "Is this Evan?" It was a woman's voice, clear and confident, but there was a hint of hesitation behind it. "Yeah, who's this?" I replied, trying to place the voice. "Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm Alex's wife." My blood ran cold. "Alex's wife?" I repeated, the words coming out like a whisper. "What do you need with me?" "I'm sorry to bother you like this," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "But I think you need to know something. About Marissa." The words hit me like a brick wall. My mind was racing. I tried to keep my composure, but everything inside me was screaming. "What do you mean? What's going on?" She hesitated before answering, and I could feel the weight of what she was about to say. "It's hard to explain, but Alex and Marissa, they've been seeing each other. I know this is probably a shock, but I need you to know that I don't think you're the only one being kept in the dark here." I was frozen. I felt my hands shake as I held the phone. This couldn't be real, could it? But the way she said it, the tremor in her voice, it felt like she was telling the truth. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because I don't know what to do anymore. I found out about them a few weeks ago. I confronted Alex, and he denied it, but I know what's been happening, and I can't keep pretending everything's fine. I thought you should know." The phone call ended, and I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, unable to process what I had just heard. I couldn't tell if I was angry, hurt, or just completely overwhelmed. I felt sick. This whole thing, the house, the strange tension, the secrecy, it was all starting to make sense, and none of it was good. I couldn't talk to Marissa about it, not yet. I needed to understand the full picture before confronting her. But the truth had already started to unravel in my mind. I wasn't imagining things. She and Alex had been involved, and it seemed like it had been going on for a while. I stayed up that night, pacing the floor of our apartment. I tried to think clearly, but my thoughts were clouded by a mixture of rage and disbelief. How could she do this to me? How could she hide something like this from me for so long? It wasn't just the betrayal that cut deep. It was the fact that she had lied to my face over and over again. And now, the only thing I could think about was how to confront her. But I had to be careful. I had to gather the right evidence. If I went in too blindly, I risked making everything worse. The next day, I decided to go to the beach house. Marissa was there, as usual, working, or so she said. It was a Sunday, and she had been there all weekend. I figured this was my chance to find out more, without her knowing I was suspicious. I drove there, my mind racing the entire way. When I arrived, the house was quiet, almost too quiet. I could hear the faint sound of music playing from inside, and when I stepped onto the porch, I saw the familiar sight of Marissa's shoes at the door. But there was something different. A car I didn't recognize, parked just outside. My heart skipped a beat. I approached the door slowly, unsure of what I would find. Would I finally confront her? Would she be caught in the act? Part of me dreaded what I might discover, but another part of me couldn't wait for the truth to come out. And that's when the door creaked open. It wasn't Marissa who greeted me. It was Alex. The moment I saw Alex standing there, my heart seemed to stop. I wasn't sure how to react. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of the situation, but nothing made sense. Why was he here? Why was he answering the door instead of Marissa? I hadn't expected to see him. Not like this, not when I was just about to confront my wife. I tried to keep my composure, but the questions and confusion came flooding in, threatening to overwhelm me. Evan, hey, what are you doing here? Alex's voice was too casual, like we were two friends who had run into each other on the street, not like someone who had been lying to my face for weeks. I stood there frozen for a moment, my mouth dry. What am I doing here? What the hell are you doing here? My voice cracked, betraying the anger that had been building inside me for days. Alex didn't flinch. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. Marissa didn't tell you I was coming by. She asked me to come over. You know, to talk about some stuff. My stomach churned. Talk about what stuff? He shrugged, like it was nothing. She said she had some things on her mind, needed someone to talk to. I'm just here to listen. I stared at him, not sure if I wanted to punch him in the face or just walk away, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. I had to know more. I had to know what the hell was going on, what they had been hiding from me. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it was hard with everything inside me screaming. Where's Marissa? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She's inside, but she's in the middle of something. You know how she gets, busy, distracted. You can come in if you want. Without thinking, I pushed past him, stepping into the house. The door slammed shut behind me, and I could hear Alex's footsteps following me. I was determined to get to the bottom of this, no matter how much it hurt. The house was eerily quiet, just like the last time I was here. But this time, the silence felt different. It felt like I was walking into a trap. I walked through the living room, trying to process everything that had just happened. My mind was racing with 1,000 different thoughts. Had Marissa really invited Alex here? Had this been planned all along? Or was I just losing my mind? I couldn't focus. All I could think about was confronting her, getting her to tell me the truth. I reached the door to the back room, where I knew Marissa had been working the last time I saw her. I was about to knock when I heard her voice. It was faint, but unmistakable. No, I think we're fine. I'll figure it out with Evan later. I froze. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Figure it out with Evan later? What the hell did that mean? I had no idea what she was talking about, but everything in me screamed that this was the moment I needed answers. I didn't knock. I didn't even hesitate. I swung the door open. Marissa was sitting at the desk, her back turned to me, but when the door opened, she turned around. She didn't look surprised to see me. In fact, she seemed almost relieved, like she had been expecting me. And then there was the look in her eyes, the one that made my heart drop into my stomach. Evan, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't expect you to come by today. I could barely breathe. I stood there, taking in the scene. The room was quiet, but the tension was suffocating. Marissa didn't seem guilty. She didn't seem ashamed. She seemed calm, too calm. The more I stared at her, the more it felt like I didn't even know her anymore. Alex appeared in the doorway behind me, standing just a little too close, like he was trying to make himself a part of the conversation. Maybe it's a good thing you're here, he said, his voice casual again. But there was something off about the way he said it. Something smug. We were just talking about you, Evan. About everything. I turned to look at him, my fists clenched by my sides. You were talking about me? I could barely control the rage that was building inside me. What's there to talk about? What the hell is going on between you two? Marissa looked at me, her expression unreadable. She didn't seem upset, not at all. She didn't even look guilty. Evan, this isn't what you think. It wasn't what I thought. My heart was racing as the pieces of the puzzle started to click into place. My mind was screaming at me to run, to leave this house, but I couldn't move. I had to know. Then tell me what it is, Marissa. Tell me what's been going on behind my back. Alex stepped closer, his smile widening. It's complicated, Evan, but I think you deserve to know. My world felt like it was crumbling. I was staring at the woman I had trusted, the woman I thought I knew, and she was standing there, looking at me like this was all some kind of joke. How had everything gone so wrong? I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but instead, I stood frozen, unable to comprehend the weight of the situation. Marissa stood up from the desk, walking toward me slowly. I never wanted to hurt you, Evan, she said, her voice soft. But things have changed. Alex and I. We've been seeing each other for a while now. The words hit me like a thunderclap, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I felt my knees go weak, like the floor was disappearing beneath me. I had always suspected something, but hearing her say it out loud was a different kind of pain. I'm sorry, she continued, her voice full of something I couldn't quite place. Sympathy? Regret? I didn't know. But none of it mattered. Nothing she said could undo what had just been revealed. The truth had shattered everything. I was standing in the house that was supposed to bring us closer, and it felt like the walls were closing in around me. I wanted to yell, to cry, to do anything to make this nightmare stop, but all I could do was stand there, staring at them. Marissa took another step toward me, but this time, I stepped back. "I think you should leave, Evan," she said, her tone finally changing, becoming colder, more distant. And just like that, I was a stranger in my own life. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, my pulse thumping in my ears as the reality of what was happening began to settle in. Marissa's words hung in the air, the weight of them suffocating me. She wasn't sorry, not truly. She wasn't even trying to explain herself in a way that made sense. The calmness in her voice, the distance in her eyes, only made it worse. This wasn't the woman I thought I knew. She wasn't even trying to defend her actions. It was like she had already moved on from whatever we had. "Leave," I repeated, my voice trembling slightly, but not from fear, anger. It was a cold, hard fury that bubbled up from deep within me. "You want me to leave? Just like that?" Alex, who had been standing silently behind me this entire time, stepped forward again. His smirk hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown, like he was savoring every second of my unraveling. "Maybe it's for the best, Evan. Marissa and we've got some things to figure out, and we don't want to drag you into it." Something inside me snapped. My head was spinning, but my thoughts were sharper than ever. I didn't know if I wanted to strangle him, scream at her, or just get the hell out of there before I did something I'd regret. But I couldn't leave. I couldn't let this go without understanding why. Why her? Why him? And why didn't she even seem to care about me anymore? I turned to face Marissa, my voice low and steady, but laced with the hurt that was quickly turning into rage. "How long, Marissa? How long has this been going on? How long have you been lying to me, pretending everything was fine?" She didn't flinch. She didn't look guilty. She didn't even seem to hesitate. "It's not like that, Evan," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It started slowly. It wasn't planned. It just happened." I could feel my hands balling into fists at my sides. "It just happened." I nearly spat, disbelief written all over my face. How does something like this just happen? How do you betray your husband like this without a second thought? Was I not enough for you? Did I not matter? Her face softened, almost as if she were pitying me. But it wasn't sympathy, it was something worse. "You're a good man, Evan. You've always been good to me. But you're not the person I need anymore. Alex, he's different. He gets me in ways that you never did." She paused, and for a moment, it felt like she was choosing her words carefully, like she was about to say something important. But then she just looked at me, almost like she had made her peace with it. "I'm sorry, but this is just how things are now." The silence that followed her words was unbearable. It was as if the world had paused, holding its breath, and in that moment, I saw it. Saw the truth I had refused to acknowledge all this time. The woman I loved, the woman I had trusted, had already checked out. She was no longer here, not in the way I thought. She had emotionally left me long before I had even suspected anything. Alex, who had been standing too close for comfort, now placed his hand on her shoulder. The gesture was casual, but the intimacy of it hit me like a brick wall. The betrayal was more than just physical. It was emotional, psychological, and everything I had worked so hard to build with her was now crumbling in front of my eyes. "Maybe you should just go, Evan," Alex said, his tone condescending. "You've got your answers. Now you can go figure out the next step in your life." The words sliced through me. I couldn't move. I wanted to fight back, to tear everything apart, but instead, I stood there, frozen in place. I had no fight left in me. Not for them. Not for this. I turned and walked out of the room, but it wasn't over. I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, but at the same time, there was a deep, hollow ache in my chest. What had I done wrong? What had I missed? There had to be something. There had to be a reason why Marissa had changed, why she had drifted so far away from me. I walked to the back of the house, to the deck that overlooked the ocean. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow across the water. Everything around me was beautiful, serene, but it all felt so distant, so far removed from the storm of emotions raging inside me. I leaned against the railing, staring out at the horizon, but I couldn't focus on the view. My mind was still racing with questions. with the reality that the woman I had shared my life with had already moved on, and she wasn't looking back. Minutes, or maybe hours, passed. I didn't know. Time didn't seem to matter anymore. I heard footsteps behind me, but didn't turn around. I already knew who it was. It was Marissa. She came to stand beside me, her presence strangely quiet, as if she were giving me space. "I don't know what to say to you, Evan," she said softly. "I don't know what I expected you to feel, but I didn't want this to happen. I really didn't. I thought I could find what I was missing, and I thought you'd understand." I shook my head, not sure whether I was angry or just numb. "You thought I'd understand? After everything? After you lied to me for months? You thought I would just let it go?" Her voice cracked a little, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the faintest hint of regret in her eyes. "I never meant to hurt you. I swear I didn't. But I've been unhappy for a long time, Evan. I thought I could bury it, ignore it, and that you and I could make it work. But I can't keep pretending anymore. I'm not the person you think I am." Her words hit harder than anything else she'd said. The finality in her voice made it clear there was no going back. She had already made her decision. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, was gone. And there was nothing I could do to change that. I didn't respond. What could I say? What was there left to say? Instead, I just turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, the last remnants of our marriage fading into the distance. As I drove away from the house, from everything I thought I knew, I realized that I was leaving behind not just a place, but a life I thought would always be mine. And now, all I had was the uncertainty of what came next. The drive back to my apartment felt like a blur. The road seemed to stretch on forever, but my mind wasn't on the scenery or the passing streetlights. I was lost in the suffocating weight of what had just happened. Every word Marissa had said, every glance Alex had thrown my way, replayed in my head like a broken record. It was all so surreal, like I had stepped into a nightmare and couldn't wake up. I couldn't escape it. The realization that my wife, had been lying to me for months, maybe longer. That she had found someone else, someone who apparently understood her in ways I couldn't. I wanted to scream. I wanted to punch the steering wheel until my hands bled. But mostly, I felt hollow, empty, like I was walking through a life that wasn't mine anymore. I finally pulled into the parking lot of my building, the headlights illuminating the familiar entrance. The place felt like a cage now. When I first moved in, I had dreamed of building a life here, of making it home, of making it ours. But now, it felt like a reminder of everything that had fallen apart. I walked up the stairs, trying to ignore the gnawing ache in my chest. The door to my apartment opened with a quiet creak as I stepped inside, and the familiar scent of the place, the faint smell of coffee, the leather of the couch, the cleaning supplies, did nothing to comfort me. It was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place of peace. But now, it felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. The silence in the apartment was deafening. I tossed my keys onto the counter and sat down on the couch, rubbing my face with my hands. My brain was overloaded. How had things gotten so out of hand? I tried to remember when I had last felt close to Marissa. When had we stopped being a team? Was it all just a lie from the start? I pulled my phone out of my pocket, scrolling through the messages and photos from our life together, each one a reminder of the illusion I had been living. I tried to picture a time when I truly knew her, but the longer I stared at the screen, the more it all felt like a distant memory, something that didn't belong to me anymore. I needed answers. I needed closure, and I wasn't going to get it from her. She had made her decision. She had moved on, emotionally, physically, and I had been too blind to see it. The hardest pill to swallow was that she had kept it from me for so long. She had lied to my face, told me everything was fine, that we were fine, when all along, she had already checked out. And I had let her. I had let her slip away, piece by piece, without even realizing it. I needed to talk to someone. I needed to hear from someone who wasn't part of this twisted mess. Someone who would give me a fresh perspective. So, I picked up my phone again and dialed the number I hadn't called in years. "Hello," came the voice on the other end. "Hey, Ben," I said, my voice shaky. Ben was an old friend, someone I had lost touch with after life got busy. But when everything fell apart with Marissa, I realized I needed someone who knew me before all this. Before the lies, before the pain. Someone who could remind me who I was before everything had changed. "Ev, man, it's been forever. What's up?" Ben sounded genuinely happy to hear from me. but there was concern in his voice too. "I don't know where to start," I said, my voice cracking. "I don't even know what to think right now." There was a brief pause on the other end, and then Ben's voice softened. "Okay, take it slow. What happened?" So I told him. Everything. From the beach house to the phone call from Sarah to walking in on them together. I told him how I felt like I had been blind to the whole thing, how it hurt to realize that Marissa had moved on without me. When I finished, Ben was quiet for a moment. "Man, that's a lot to take in. But listen, I get it. I really do. It sounds like Marissa has made her choice, whether you're ready to accept it or not. And as hard as it is to hear, you need to accept that. You deserve someone who's not going to hide things from you. Someone who will love you the way you love them." I could hear the sincerity in his voice, but it didn't make the pain any easier. "I thought I knew her, Ben. I thought she was the one I could trust with everything." "I know," Ben said, "but people change. And sometimes, the person you thought you knew isn't the person they are anymore. But you can't let that define you. You can't let her mistakes take away everything you've worked for." His words felt like a punch to the gut, but in a strange way, they helped. I had spent so much time obsessing over the past, over what had gone wrong, that I had forgotten to look forward. I couldn't change what Marissa had done. I couldn't make her love me again, but I could control what came next. "I guess I've been too focused on the past," I said, the weight of the realization settling on me. "I've been holding on to a version of her that doesn't exist anymore, and I need to let go." "Exactly," Ben said, his tone lighter now. "It's time to focus on you, man. You've got to figure out what makes you happy. You've got to move forward." That night, as I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, I realized that Ben was right. I couldn't keep dwelling on what had been. I had to start over. But where? How? The thought of moving on felt impossible. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I needed a change. I needed a fresh start. Maybe the beach house, the place that had been the symbol of everything I had thought was perfect, wasn't the answer. Maybe it was time to let go of it all. The house, the memories, the lies, and move on. The next morning, I made a decision. I was going to put the house on the market. I needed to sever ties with the past. I couldn't keep pretending that things would go back to normal, and I couldn't stay in a place that held so many painful memories. As I made the call to the real estate agent, a strange sense of relief washed over me. It wasn't a fix. It wasn't a cure, but it was a start towards something new, something I could build for myself on my own terms. The first step was done, but the road ahead? That was still uncertain, and that terrified me. But I had no choice but to face it head on. The days that followed felt like a blur. I moved through them in a haze, one foot in front of the other, but never really here. I'd left the beach house behind, and with it, the memories that had been haunting me. The decision to sell it had been more than just about the property. It had been a symbolic act, a way of cutting ties with everything that had been broken. But even as I packed up the last of my things and handed over the keys, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was abandoning more than just a house. I felt like I was leaving behind my old self, the man who had once been certain about his life, his love, and the future he was building. That man no longer existed, and I didn't know how to be the person who was left standing in his place. I was floating, caught between the man I had been and the one I was still trying to become. The one I needed to become. I had a few good days, moments of clarity, where I could almost convince myself I was moving forward. But the loneliness crept in at night. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, in the cold silence of my apartment, and wonder where everything had gone wrong. The bed felt too big. The space around me felt too empty. And every time I looked at my phone, I knew I was avoiding the inevitable. I had to face the truth. I had to talk to Marissa. The thought of seeing her again made my stomach twist. After everything that had happened, I wasn't sure I could look her in the eyes without feeling a wave of anger or betrayal. But there was no way around it. We had unfinished business. We had to talk, really talk, about everything that had gone wrong. And I had to know, deep down, if there was any part of her that regretted what had happened, or if I was just another casualty of her escape. I called her. It took all of 5 seconds to dial her number, but my hand shook the entire time. When the phone rang, I realized how much I had been dreading this moment, the moment when I finally had to confront her with everything I had been avoiding. The call went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I didn't know what to say. I just hung up and stared at the screen. That evening, I received a text from her. "Evan, we need to talk. Can we meet?" I stood there for a long moment, the phone in my hand, my thoughts racing. I didn't know what I wanted from this conversation. I didn't know if I even wanted closure or if I just wanted to hear her admit the truth. I didn't want to be angry anymore. I didn't want to be hurt, but I didn't know how to stop feeling those things. I agreed to meet her the next day. When I showed up at the cafe, I almost turned around and left. The place was too familiar, too full of memories of us and happier times. I could already picture us sitting here, laughing over coffee, making plans. Now, it felt like a cruel joke. But I stayed. I sat down at the table and waited. The air was thick with tension, and I knew, just by the way the waitress smiled at me, that everyone could sense something was wrong. I wasn't the only one who knew this meeting wasn't just a casual catch-up. And then, she walked in. Marissa looked different. Not just physically, though there was a change in her appearance, something I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was the way her hair had been cut, shorter than it had been when we were together. Or maybe it was the way she moved, more confidently, as though she had shed the person she had been when she was with me. She sat down across from me, her expression unreadable. There was no apology in her eyes, no remorse. Just calm, almost too calm. "Hi," she said, her voice flat. "Thanks for meeting me." I didn't know how to start. What was there to say? I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine, like I didn't know what had been going on. So, I went for it. "Why, Marissa?" I asked, my voice catching. "Why him? Why Alex?" Her eyes flickered for a moment, like she hadn't expected me to come at her like that. She took a deep breath before answering. "I didn't plan it, Evan. You have to believe me. It wasn't something I was looking for. But it happened. And once it did, I couldn't pretend like everything was okay between us anymore." I stared at her, feeling the heat rise in my chest. "Couldn't pretend? You didn't even try? You lied to me. For months. I don't even recognize you anymore." Her eyes softened, but there was still that distance. That coldness. I know I hurt you. I never wanted to, but somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like I belonged with you. I don't know when it happened, but I couldn't ignore it anymore." "Stop," I interrupted, my voice rising. "I don't want your excuses, Marissa. You could have talked to me. You could have said something. Instead, you just kept pretending, hiding things from me, lying to my face. I don't even know who you are anymore." Her lips pressed together tightly, and for a moment, she looked like she might cry. But she didn't. Instead, she folded her arms across her chest, a defensive posture I hadn't seen from her before. "I know I messed up, but I can't change it. I can't take back what happened." The finality in her words hit me like a slap. She wasn't sorry, not in the way I needed her to be. She was resigned to the choices she had made, as though they were inevitable, as though she had no regrets. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping across the floor. "You don't get it, do you?" I said, my voice shaking with frustration. "I didn't need an explanation, Marissa. I needed you to care." The cafe felt like it was closing in around me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't look at her anymore, because all I could see was a version of her I didn't know and didn't want to. Before she could say anything else, I turned and walked out, the door swinging shut behind me. I didn't look back. But that night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized something. She was never going to be the person I thought she was. And maybe that was the hardest part of all. It wasn't just the betrayal. It wasn't even the lies. It was that I had invested everything in a woman who had already moved on long before I even knew she was gone. And I couldn't change that. The days following my confrontation with Marissa felt like a slow-motion unraveling. I couldn't quite shake the feeling of her coldness, the way she sat across from me, as though she had already said everything she needed to say and had no more room for remorse. In a strange way, that final conversation with her had crystallized something in me. The realization that I would never get the closure I thought I needed, and that I would have to figure out how to move on without it. I had spent so long holding on to the idea of us, the image of the life I thought we were building together, that I didn't know who I was without it. I felt like I had lost more than just a relationship. I had lost a piece of my own identity, a version of myself that was tied to that life, to her. But as the days passed, the bitterness in me started to fade, replaced by a strange, unsettling calm. I knew I couldn't keep dwelling on the past. I couldn't let it consume me, no matter how much it hurt. I had to start rebuilding. Slowly, one step at a time. The hardest part was seeing her everywhere, even when she wasn't there. Every corner of my apartment, every empty space, reminded me of her. The photos we took together, vacations, family gatherings, the small moments that had once meant so much to me, stared back at me, mocking me. I was haunted by the life that could have been, the one I had convinced myself was real. I began to box up the remnants of us, the trinkets and memories that didn't belong in my life anymore. Each item I packed away felt like a part of me was being left behind, but in a way, it was liberating too. The more I packed, the more I realized how much of me had been tied to her. I had built a life with someone who no longer existed, and that life was holding me back from becoming the person I was meant to be. It wasn't just the house or the things we shared. It was the person I thought she was. The person I had believed would always be by my side. But now that was gone, and in its place was a void, a space I didn't know how to fill. So, I did what anyone would do in that situation. I threw myself into work. It wasn't the healthiest way to cope, but it gave me something to focus on. It kept the noise of my emotions at bay. But even with all the distractions in the world, I couldn't escape the gnawing feeling that I needed something else. I needed to understand why it had happened. Not just the betrayal, but the why. Why had she changed? Why had she walked away so easily? And, more importantly, what had I missed? I spent a lot of time in the evenings walking. Sometimes, I would wander the streets aimlessly, the cold night air biting at my skin, but never enough to numb the sharpness of the ache inside me. I would think about Marissa, about the version of her I had loved, the one who seemed so full of promise. I thought about Alex too, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe because I was angry at him. Maybe because I resented the way he had slid into my life so effortlessly. He hadn't known her like I did. He hadn't shared our memories, our experiences. But somehow, he had become a part of her life, a part of the betrayal. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I found myself at a bar in the city. I hadn't planned to go there. In fact, I didn't even know why I walked in. It wasn't the type of place I usually went, but I was tired of being alone. Tired of pretending I was fine when I was falling apart inside. I ordered a drink and took a seat at the bar, staring into the amber liquid as if it could somehow wash away the heaviness in my chest. "Rough day?" a voice asked from beside me. I looked up, startled. A woman was sitting next to me. She was in her late 20s, with dark hair and a casual smile that didn't feel forced, like she wasn't just trying to make small talk. Her eyes were warm, but there was something about her that made me feel like she could see through me, like she knew exactly what I was running from. "Yeah," I muttered. "You could say that." She nodded, taking a sip of her drink. Life has a way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it? I wasn't sure why, but I found myself telling her a little bit about what had happened with Marissa, with the lies and the betrayal. I wasn't trying to make myself look like the victim, but I was tired of holding everything inside. Maybe she was just a stranger, but it felt good to unload, even if just for a few minutes. "I'm sorry you're going through that," she said after I finished speaking. "But sometimes the hardest part isn't the betrayal itself. It's realizing you weren't the person you thought you were. You weren't the person you thought you had to be." Her words hit me harder than anything I had heard in a while. She didn't say them with pity, but with understanding. It was as if she knew exactly what I was feeling. It was a little unsettling, but also comforting in a strange way. "I don't even know who I am anymore," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. She smiled gently, her eyes softening. "You'll find yourself again, but it's going to take time. And maybe, just maybe, you're supposed to lose yourself to figure out who you really are." I stared at her for a long moment, wondering how a stranger could see through me so easily. I wasn't sure if it was the alcohol or if her words had just cut through the fog in my head, but something about what she said resonated deeply. She stood up to leave, her hand brushing mine briefly. "Don't let one chapter define your entire story," she said, her voice full of quiet wisdom. I watched her walk out of the bar, the door swinging closed behind her, and for the first time in days, I felt a small glimmer of hope. Maybe I wasn't completely lost. Maybe there was a way forward. Maybe, after everything that had happened, I could still rebuild. I left the bar soon after, the cold night air hitting me with a clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. The pain was still there, but it was quieter now, a dull hum beneath the surface. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I was ready to face whatever came next, ready to find my way back to myself. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel so alone. It's funny how life can shift in ways you don't expect. One day, you're drowning in a sea of hurt and confusion, and the next, you're standing on solid ground again, breathing a little easier. The days after that night at the bar were different. It wasn't that everything magically fell into place overnight, but I began to see things from a new perspective. I started to realize that, while I couldn't change the past, I still had control over my future. And I wasn't about to let the mistakes of others define who I was or who I could become. I decided to take things slowly. I didn't need to rush into anything, especially not with my heart still recovering. I took the time to reconnect with old friends, people I had neglected when I had been so focused on the life I thought I should have. Ben, who had been there for me during the darkest times, became a constant reminder that I wasn't alone. And little by little, I started to find joy in the things I used to love, reading books without feeling guilty for not being productive, taking long walks in the city, listening to music that made me feel alive again. I moved into a smaller apartment, one with a view of the city skyline. It wasn't anything extravagant, but it felt like mine. A space where I could breathe, where I could feel grounded again. I redecorated, slowly turning it into a place that felt like me again, not just the shell of the person I had been before. And every morning, as the sunlight filtered through the windows, I reminded myself that I was taking steps forward, even if they were small. But there were days when the past would creep in, when memories of Marissa would float to the surface, uninvited, and I would feel that familiar sting of loss. Those days were hard. There were still moments when I missed her, missed the person I thought she was, and I had to let myself feel the sadness without letting it consume me. But then, I would remember what I had learned. I am more than my past. More than what anyone else thinks of me. A few months later, I got a message from her. A simple text, just checking in. Hey Evan, I've been thinking about you. I hope you're doing okay. I didn't know what to feel when I saw her name pop up on my phone. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to block her out entirely, but another part of me was curious. It had been a while since we had spoken, and maybe there was something that needed to be said, even if just for closure. We agreed to meet again, but this time, it was different. There was no anger, no bitterness in the air. We sat down at a cafe, a neutral place, and for the first time in a long time, we spoke honestly with each other. I never wanted to hurt you, Evan, she said, her voice softer than I remembered. I know I did, and I'm so sorry for that. I was lost, and I didn't know how to fix it. I nodded, feeling the weight of those words settle in my chest. I could feel the sincerity in her voice, but it wasn't about her anymore. I had forgiven her in my own way, not for her sake, but for mine. Forgiveness wasn't about her. It was about freeing myself from the anger that had held me captive for so long. I know, I said, my voice steady. And I'm sorry too. I wasn't perfect, but I've learned that I need to move forward. I need to let go of what wasn't meant to be. She looked at me, a flicker of understanding passing between us. I'm glad to hear that, she said softly. I hope you find what you're looking for. And that was it. We said our goodbyes, not with anger or resentment, but with a sense of quiet acceptance. It was a strange peace that came over me, one I didn't expect to feel so soon. I walked away from that conversation feeling lighter, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. There was no more need to look back. The next chapter of my life had already begun. It wasn't perfect. There would still be moments of doubt, moments where I questioned if I was truly on the right path, but I was learning to trust myself again. I was learning to embrace the freedom that came from choosing my own way, without the shadows of the past looming over me. And then, just when I thought I had everything figured out, life surprised me again. Her name was Lily. We met at a gallery opening. I wasn't looking for anything, honestly. I was just there to appreciate the art. But there she was, standing next to a painting that caught my eye, and the moment our eyes met, something shifted. She had a quiet confidence about her, a warmth in her smile that felt real, not forced. We started talking, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something that I hadn't felt in ages: hope. We exchanged numbers, and the connection between us grew naturally, with no pressure, no expectations. We both understood what it was like to lose something, to rebuild from scratch, and to start over with a clean slate. But most importantly, we both understood that sometimes the best things in life come when you least expect them, and that healing happens in unexpected ways. Months passed, and I found myself falling for her in a way that felt different. It wasn't about filling the hole left by Marissa. It wasn't about trying to recreate something that had been broken. It was about two people learning to trust each other, learning to build something real from the ground up. And maybe that's what life is about after all, learning to let go of what no longer serves you and opening yourself up to the possibilities of what could be. For the first time in a long time, I could honestly say I was happy. Not perfect, not without scars, but content. And that was enough. The past had shaped me, but it didn't define me. I was building a future, one step at a time, and it was mine to shape. And as I stood there, holding Lily's hand, looking forward to whatever came next, I realized that everything had led me here, to this moment, to this new beginning. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited for what the future held.